A little bit about me. I'm Aunty Beryl. I came to Sydney when I was 16 years of age. Survived through all the bad times and flourished in the good times. I come from a small country town in northwestern New South Wales, Walgett. Recently, one of my cousin's daughters did the family tree and a lot of research on our background. And then we find out that there were 3 Austrian brothers that came to Australia. I bought a property in Walgett where I come from, and they married into Aboriginal women. I left school when I was 14 and 9 months because that's when my mum passed away, and my aunt took us and raised us. She didn't want to separate us, so she had 9 of us and 7 of her own children, and she kept us all together. We were very protected by our family from both sides. There was no way in the world they were going to have us split up or taken away. So they were very smart people. So my aunt always made sure that we had plenty to eat, that we were clean, that we went to school, and she had rules. And my parents made sure that we went to school. I was 5 years old, and there was 4 little Aboriginal girls and 1 Aboriginal boy in our class. We didn't learn a lot because the teacher either sat you up the front of the class or sat you up the back of the class. And that was it. Because they knew that our parents didn't have much education, so what was the point, I guess, at that time? But we were very determined to learn, all 5 of us, and we all turned out okay. We ended up getting an education. When we played hopscotch, I never told you that. That was the game that we played hopscotch, and you had to go 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7. So that learned us the numbers. So we found a way, and Aboriginal people, like I said, we find a way. We're very smart, and in our journey. And if you look at us, our forefathers from way back, that were here living on the land before the people discovered it, Captain Cook discovered it, they lived the life. They had agriculture, they had everything. They knew when fruits were in season, they knew where to go to fish, they knew how to get food, so they knew what grew, what didn't grow, and they were survivors, and they knew the land. And I left school, me and my cousin, who was a year older than me, and we went to work. When I was working in Malta, you got very little money. You had no rights whatsoever. You had to bath outside. You had to go to the toilet outside. You couldn't sit at the table with them and eat. You had to scrub the floors. You had to polish the furniture so you could see your face in it. And then you'd be up early, 5 o'clock in the morning, mixing up the corn for feeding the pigs and feeding the animals. So there was lots of chores to do. We had no time clock. It was sun up to sundown. We had no ABC books or anything at home. And my oldest couldn't read and write, very little. And so what I did was I'd sit at the table with the kerosene lamp and I'd get the IXL jam tin and I'd learn the letters and the golden syrup tin, and then I'd form letters. Nobody knew I was doing this. And then one day I explained it to my aunt, and she said to me, "Oh, you're a very clever girl." I said, "Okay." And so that's why when we sat down to have she said to go, to come to Sydney and get a job because some of my cousins were down here. But the most important thing she wanted me to do was to work, earn some money, and get an education for me, so that I can take it back and give to my siblings.
You got to Redfern. What did it feel like?
First day it was scary because all you could see is all big brick buildings and people are hustling and bustling, and I come from a quiet country town. When I got off the train, my cousins were there to meet me. My cousins had place out at Granville. My literacy and numeracy was zilch. I came down, I learned to read off a jam tin and a syrup tin, but I did know a few words and I knew how to communicate with people. That was my gift. My first job was working in a pub cleaning, because that's all Aboriginal people got, was cleaning jobs or housekeeping jobs, or you never went to work in an office. It was a little bit more. You could survive, but everybody shared. And then I moved into a house in Newtown. A few of the girls pulled their money in, paid the rent. A lot of us congregated on the block where the elders there that lived there looked after us and helped us out. And that's where we all went. That was our meeting place. That was our home. And Redfern is still my home today. Redfern was a place where we just all came to. We knew Redfern. We knew it wasn't far from Central. We knew that it wouldn't get lost. We knew we'd have a home in somebody's household there. And it was always where we'd find some relative or a friend. So that's what it became to us, and it still is. We knew that we had to become who we were, not because somebody wanted to become this other person. So that's why we fought for our rights. The others just, the media and that just crucified us. Can you imagine a 16-year-old girl in a big city? It was a difficult time in everybody's life. There was no equality. There was no, oh yes, we'll give this girl a go and see how she goes. We had to be strong enough to do what we came to the city to do. I suppose their concept of what was going on with us fighting for our rights, they have this concept in their head that this is what Aboriginal people are all about, or we're always lazy or we're drunks. We had no rights until 1967. Prior to that, we had to do a civil rights thing, like Charlie Perkins took the model from America and went on a freedom ride, and then they did lots of marches in the city, and it started from there, because and to Aboriginal people, life. Everybody else, like in Western Australia, Northern Territory, was starting to get their land back, but in New South Wales, no. So that was why it all happened. And then I met a family who wanted a housekeeper, so I applied for the job, and that was really my first job that really meant something to me after a couple of weeks.
This family wasn't frightened of Aboriginal people then?
No.
Right. And what's their background?
Well, they were from Europe. They were Hungarians, so they needed somebody to look after their children. And they gave me the job. When I first went to pick up the nanny, I couldn't read very much, right? And so I had to read to the children. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how am I going to do this? So we had a lot of little golden books then. And so I started telling stories and making them into my own story, making it up. Because that's what Aboriginal people were, storytellers. They believed it because they went to sleep. They lived in London and they come back to Australia and I meet up with them. And I tell their children the stories, and I used to tell their parents. I got a formal education by becoming a nanny. I still remain in that family, even though the boys are in their 50s now and got their own families. They became Lucy and Pop became my foster parents. The children, they just loved me to death. Still a big part of their family and their children as well. They encouraged me to study. They encouraged me to get my driver's license. When I had the opportunity to go to university and get a degree, they encouraged that and supported it very well. So it was. Then when I went off to get an education, first of all, I worked at a preschool for Aboriginal children as well. They wanted a cook, so I went there and tried out for that and got the job. not only became the cook, but I became the spokesperson for the Aboriginal young mums. Well, they had no rights, and they were a little bit apprehensive, I suppose. They were young, and they had to look after their children.
Was there a possibility of their children being taken away still that time?
A big possibility.
A big possibility.
Yeah.
Because are they kind of children out of wedlock, some of them?
Yeah, big possibility. And so, but they were lucky because they had parents that nurtured them and their children.
An extended family.
And an extended family. So everybody, most of them lived on the block, so everybody knew everybody. Sisters of Mercy did. They set up the preschool, so the children can have some form of education, and that's what it was all about. And they went around, picked them up from the block on the bus, brought them up to a preschool that they set up. They had a hot meal during the day, and we had a big warehouse there that was a store. So we'd give them a shower, and if they needed clothing or whatever, nurturing them. And I continued to do that. And then I was given the opportunity to go off and get an education myself. The hospitality was always on the agenda, even when I was working at the preschool. We didn't have a big budget, so I wanted to go to healthy meals, or on the menu, healthy meals on a small budget because of the Aboriginal kids and the diet. Barangaroo, the Aboriginal lady who Barangaroo's named after, she went out every day in her little boat that she made out of bark to get fish to feed her family. She was a very strong Aboriginal woman. And when I was asked at an interview one time, they asked me to say something or what I thought about it. I wrote that I think every woman, no matter who you are or where you come from, have got a bit of Barangaroo in us, because that's who we are, and because we're very strong. We used to go down where the Opera House is now and swim and fish and do all those things, because the harbour wasn't as polluted as it is today. I wouldn't fish there now, though, and you're not allowed to anyway. We weren't allowed to anyway, but we did. I spent 50 years of my life in Sydney. Yeah, I've had a pretty good, healthy life. My children were born here and grown up down here. My grandchildren, great-granny lives here. I am married to a Dutch guy who's been around for 49 years, so we must be doing something right. Well, he came with his father came out here first and found a home, a job, and then lived in a flat out of Bondi, and then he sent for who was my mother-in-law now, and the children, him and my husband's brother, and they came out. And then by then my father-in-law had a property down at Corrimal, which is down the south coast. Our life hasn't always been smooth sailing. Because of who I am and because of who my husband is. When I met my husband, I was babysitting for my friend and my friend's husband, who was my husband's friend. So he happened to come over to bring Fred's toolbox back. That's when I met him. And then we just clicked from there, and that was it. And yeah, it's been a healthy, good, loving marriage, and we've got 3 beautiful kids and grandchildren now, and a great-granny now. So it's been a journey. At the time when I got married, to be honest with you, it wasn't easy. When I was engaged, I was only engaged to my husband. His family were always holidayers and camping people. They wanted to see Australia. So we went to Dubbo, but my mother-in-law booked a hotel, and when we arrived, I knew that the people at the hotel didn't want me there, but they didn't dare say anything. They never said a word, but I can tell that they didn't want me there, because Aboriginal people weren't allowed in hotels then. And they were allowed in some of the hotels, but in the beer garden or whatever, not to stay there as a guest. I told my husband, he was my husband-to-be, but I never told my parents-in-law because my mother-in-law
Wouldn't have said, don't get involved.
no, she would have done the opposite.
Oh, really? Right.
Because she's come through something similar where they come from.
Right.
And she's had that experience, and she's always said to me, but you are the first people. This is your country.
What attracted you to Andrew?
I'm the opposite. I'm the party girl, and he's the stay-at-home.
Complimentary.
Opposites attract. I said to him before I took him home to Walgett to meet my oldies and my family, you just go up there and you respect them for who they are, and they'll respect you. And that's what they did. And like now, if I divorced him tomorrow, he'll be still part of the family. How I became a business person is because we were training our Aboriginal kids and people into hospitality, and we had nowhere to employ them at the time. So I decided to set up my own catering company. So I set that up, and then the kids that we used to train, we used to train them into the catering side of it and functions at the hospitality training school in Wilson Street. And then I'd employ them to work on the functions. So that gave them a stepping stone to build up their own self-esteem and then to go out and find employment. And then it's taken me quite a few years, but finally I got partnerships with corporate world now. So they take a lot of our kids. Word of mouth is the one way we recruit. They come and they try, and I always take about 20, and then we allow for dropouts. And if we get 12 out of that 20, then I will say we're doing our job. But a lot of them maybe not ready for it, but I will say to them the door is open. You can always come back. And a lot of the people have gone on their own journey. Some of them now have got their RN, they've become nurses. Some have gone overseas and working overseas. Some are working up at Uluru, where they went up for a 3 months trial, but then one of the girls, she stayed up there, I think it's 8 years now. When they walk out the door, we help place them into a job. I will say stay there for 6 months. You don't like it, you can always try something else. The sweetness we got was the honey. The honey grows in the trees down here, and up in the territory, it's the honey ants. So when you go to the Northern Territory, you just bite the back of the honey ants, but you've got to dig for it under the roots of the trees, and you come out all red dirt because I've done it with a pair of white shorts on. But it is an amazing journey when you go out with the elders at Uluru. You Kondong, I have to say this right. Okay. Sometimes I say it wrong. So the Kondong is about a size, some up in the Northern Territory they grow the size of an apricot. Down here they grow just that big, a little bit bigger than a cherry. You can make jams, chutneys, you can do dessert. I specialise in bush tucker now. Everybody says the kangaroo tastes like an old rubber boot. I said because they cook it too long. Because kangaroo's got no fat in it, so you just throw it on. With me, basically, we used to throw it on an open fire on chicken wire and char grill it, and then just let it rest. And it's time for us to start sharing our ingredients and our food. It's taken a while, but it's happening. And the only thing with Aboriginal food is it's seasonal. That's why the Aboriginal people used to go to different states. In Sydney, it's all coastal. It's all fish. When you go to Queensland, it's tropical. And, my first business is my own catering company, Yama Bargay, and I still have that open today. We started catering for local Aboriginal community. Then we started catering for corporate world, and then it snowballed from there because everybody wanted to try bush tucker. We've catered for 100, 250, 300, 500. we did the breakfast, right? There was all the millionaires. They all came down to the school because they wanted the space to do the launch. So I said to my husband, you need to get up 4 o'clock in the morning because I need the car. We only had one car at the time, and you go to work on the train. He said, "What do you got the car that time of the morning?" I said, "I've got to get in there because we're setting up this breakfast." He said, "Who has breakfast at that time of the morning?" I said, "People with money and people like me who want to make money. So just get up." It was a learning curve for all the students as well. They had a beautiful breakfast. When he found out I was fundraising to go to Europe with the students, he sent his staff down there. And I said to Tim, "What are you doing?" He said, "Aunt, we're here to help you fundraise." I said, "How did you know I wanted to fundraise?" He said, "Oh, we heard through the grapevine." So I'm just sitting on the chair, and he said, "This is what we'll do. We'll have as many tables as you can, 2,500 a table." I nearly fell off the chair. I nearly fell off the chair.
Divided by 10 perhaps, or less.
And, it was 10 at a table. And so, anyway, all the tables were sold just like that. And so they had one spare on the night they had, I knew that 2 days before there was one businessman, he bought a table, and he said, "Tell Aunty Beryl she can donate it to the community." So I invited all the oldies to the breakfast. But I respected them, and we treated them like, a lot of them were out of their comfort zone. So we treated them with respect. I said to the students, if you respect people, you get that respect back. Lovely little ex-student here. She's still a student. Leanne came through the job. I also run a job ready program in Redfern at the National Centre of Indigenous Excellence. What we do there is I set up the school 11 years ago. So we train our kids in hospitality and Certificate 2, and then we place them into jobs. I've been doing that for the last 11 years. And within doing that, we've got over 2,000 of our people into jobs. How precious did that grace yeah, I fully was to me. My aunt, she used to sing, she taught us all to make bread and butter pudding. And then because I was so good at it, she started singing out to me, "Where's the bread and butter cook?" So that's how I got the name. So I was always in the kitchen, and so that's how I become the bread and butter cook. And nobody ever thought about becoming a chef or using that word, little only. Everybody was cooks, the shearers cooks. I cooked out in the shearing sheds on a property with the shearers, and my brothers used to work out there. So it was just, attached to cook, but only because my aunt taught us all how to cook a meal, and that's been with us for the rest of our lives. So that's the way it was. You learned how to cook a meal to survive.